Good evening, everyone. I'm going to start in one moment while we just wait for everyone to come in. Okay, we're going to get started. I'm very happy to welcome you all here tonight to the second meeting in the series of A Land for All Club. My name is Miriam Jacobs, and I'm Director of Operations of the Israeli branch of the movement. A Land for All is an Israeli-Palestinian movement that offers a new and shared vision for resolving the conflict. At the basis of the vision are two independent states, Israel and Palestine, which maintain a partnership within a confederation. On one hand, clear and defined borders. On the other hand, freedom of movement and residence for all across the country, joint institutions and partnership instead of separation. In other words, our shared vision strives to resolve the conflict in its broadest respect. Two states to end the occupation, one homeland to end the conflict. Tonight's event is a part of our pilot series of panel discussions that each delve into one of the core principles of our movement's vision. And the aim tonight is for our audience to become more familiarized with the Land for All's approach to Jerusalem, and to encourage you to open your minds to the growing shift from the classic two-state solution approach of separation to one of land sharing as a possible, more feasible, and possibly more practical solution to the conflict to be discussed this evening. So in a moment, I will hand it over to our facilitator and a few technical notes in the meantime. First of all, just to say that I've disabled the chat in the shared space to allow panelists and our moderator and all of us to be able to focus on the content being presented. You will be able to write your questions and comments in the chat to any of the co-hosts, and I encourage you to write those questions and comments in the chat to me directly, Miriam Jacobs, and you can specify who they're relevant for. And our speakers will respond to as many of them as the time allows. So we should be here until around 9:30. I also ask you please to stay muted or to mute yourself if you're not already muted, and unmute only if you're asked to speak. And you can certainly raise your hand or again message us in the chat, message me in the chat if you have a burning desire to speak. I'm going to hand you over now to our discussion facilitator, Meron Rappaport, co-founder of A Land for All, who will introduce our panelists. Hi.
Good evening for you all. Thank you for joining us. I'm Eran Rappaport. I'm one of the founders of A Land for All, an Israeli-Palestinian movement, as Miriam said. Will be in this discussion. I will be the only Tel Avivian on the panel. We will have three people speaking from Jerusalem. We will have Nivin Sanduka. She is an expert in program development, peace building, and gender issues, currently executive director of Hukukna, NGO based in Jerusalem, focusing on civic and political rights of Palestinians in East Jerusalem. Our second, and our host will be Professor Menachem Klein. He is a Professor Emeritus for Political Science from Bar-Ilan University, was an advisor on Jerusalem issues during the Camp David talks, one of the founders of the Geneva Initiative and author of many books on the Palestinian-Israeli conflict. And we will have Eran Tzidkiyahu, PhD from the Center for International Studies at Sciences Po in Paris, a geopolitical tour guide specializing on Jerusalem and fellow in the Forum for Regional Thinking. For me, I must say before beginning, I must say, I'm Tel Avivian. I was born and raised in Tel Aviv. I live all my life in Tel Aviv. And I think for many people that are living in Tel Aviv, that are not part of Jerusalem, for many Israelis, I would say, Jerusalem is something a little bit threatening, something a little bit extreme, and but I learned from my journalistic work, and not only, and of course for my political work, that I think Jerusalem is the core issue, and it cannot be solved through separation, as was proposed in many cases. The three speakers here, Nivin and Menachem, are not part of A Land for All. Eran is, but the three speakers are united in the desire for open city. I will just, before going to the speakers themselves, I will briefly read our paragraph regarding Jerusalem. I will put it also on the chat. We are proposing to keep Jerusalem whole, open, and shared rather than carved by walls and fences. Jerusalem will be the capital of both states, Israel and Palestine. It will have a special governing body to which both countries, Israel and Palestine, will delegate the powers it needs to function. Neither side will have domination or exclusivity, and it will be run jointly to the benefit of all its residents, Jews and Arabs. So I will start from Eran Tzidkiyahu and ask, and I will give each speaker something like 7 minutes to have their view of how they see the future of Jerusalem, how they see a just Jerusalem, a Jerusalem that can be something of a solution to the conflict and not the problem that is promoting and prolonging the conflict. So Eran, please start. You are on mute, Eran.
Okay, thank you, Meron. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, so thank you very much, and hello, everybody. And of course, Nivin and Menachem, I'm happy to be here with you. And I will start by saying that indeed, Jerusalem is the heart of the reality. A poet, an Israeli poet, Maya Bejerano, said, "Yerushalayim hi halev shel hametziut, al-Quds hi qalb al-waqi'." Indeed, Jerusalem is the heart of events, and it is the key for instability in the last century, maybe, and definitely in the last 30 years, since the 90s and the peace process that collapsed around Jerusalem's holy sites, not only, but to a great extent. And we cannot go around Jerusalem. One of the mistakes of the past were to keep Jerusalem to the end of the interim period. And I think it is unwise, and as the past experience taught us. My vision is indeed an open city, while most of the solutions that were seriously considered by both sides, Israelis and Palestinians, in Camp David, offered by Barak, in Annapolis by Olmert, accepted by the Palestinian side, by Geneva and by others, they talk about dividing the city. In many cases with a harsh, solid border in the middle of the city between two states. I hold the opinion that Jerusalem cannot be divided. This idea was presented for the first time, if I'm not mistaken, by Faisal Husseini in the late 80s as some kind of an experiment in West Jerusalem, in an event of Shalom Achshav, of Peace Now. And ever since, this was the preferred solution of the Palestinians. that were willing to accept a divided Jerusalem in a two-state solution, but preferred an open city. While the Zionist left, the Labour Party, always wanted a divided city. Today, studies show that there is a huge interdependency between the two sides of the city. Many Palestinians are dependent for their livelihood on daily access to West Jerusalem, to work. West Jerusalem services, or Jerusalem as a whole, of course, are dependent on this labor from East Jerusalem. Economically, the East will collapse if it cannot access the West. Functionally, the West will not function if there is no open and free passage. More than that, beyond this, and I'm referring to data that was given, that was presented in Marek Stern's PhD, is also a Jerusalemite, an important scholar with a lot of background in policy and urban geography, and is also a friend of mine. And together with a group of Jerusalemites, we've been studying this issue of an open city and different possibilities for Jerusalem, not only academically and statistically, but also just by being in the city and experiencing it and feeling it. This is one urban fabric. And Jerusalem was one city for thousands of years, and it was divided only for 19 years. Physically divided by a border, yeah? Now, of course, today, Jerusalem is divided in many ways by its inhabitants, by the infrastructure, the gaps in the level of services and discrimination. Yes, of course, Jerusalem is both Israeli and Palestinian. But in Jerusalem, we have elements of, and this relates to a book even was written by Menachem that will talk after me, that connects Jerusalem between Jaffa, and Hebron. And behind me, the background, because I'm talking to you now from France, not from Jerusalem where I live usually. So I put the background of Jaffa Gate. And Jaffa Gate is called in Arabic Bab el-Khalil. El-Khalil is Hebron. And it is a gate, the western gate in the walls of the old city. And it is called Jaffa in Hebrew and English because it is the reference of many Israelis maybe to the city of Jaffa, Tel Aviv. But the Arabs call it Bab el-Khalil. This is a completely different way of imagining the mental map of this country. It's Jerusalem in the end of the Tel Aviv-Jerusalem road between the Mediterranean and the desert and the territories, or it's in the heart of a different axis between Bethlehem and Ramallah, Hebron and Nablus, etc. So Jerusalem has elements of a shared existence with civic elements alongside some aspects of discrimination, of course, just like we have in Jaffa and Haifa. But it also contains elements of segregation like we have in Hebron. Harsh settlements in the heart of the Arab sphere, like in Sheikh Jarrah, in Silwan, and in the old city. So in my vision, as an open city, Jerusalem is the capital of both Israelis, Yerushalayim in the west, and Palestinians, Al-Quds in the east. It is a physically united city that is managed municipally in the east by Palestine, in the west by Israel, with some kind of a shared metropolitan area. This vision can be implemented in a two-state solution, in a confederation, in a one-state solution, and in any other political constellation. I can talk more and more about the fabric of life. But yes. Yeah, exactly what I wanted to say. I'm not going to do that now. I do want to say two more points. I'll say it quickly if I have the time.
Very short, because I will
The old city of Jerusalem is a different separated area that should be administered separately. It should not be divided like the Clinton parameters, for example, propose between quarters. The gate, the street of the chain, for example, cannot be an international border. باب السلسلة, طريق السلسلة, رحوب الشلشلة, yeah, or El Silsila Street. It's a narrow alley. The old city should be administered in what we used to call in the 90s, the Vatican model, some kind of a committee. And within the old city, the holy sites, especially Al-Aqsa Mosque and the Temple Mount, should have a separate administrative reality. I'm not even saying solution, which maybe will not be anchored in a final status accord, but more of something of a process, more of an interim. And in this respect, my last word will be that probably in a far-going future scenario, Jews will have access to worship on this esplanade only if Palestinians or Muslim Arabs have political control and sovereignty over the esplanade. Yeah, and
we will not
I'll stop here.
To go straight into the Temple Mount and Al-Aqsa. Let's leave the bombs, the time bombs to the end. Menachem, I will trying to be on the 7 minutes, referring also, of course, your vision, but referring also to what Eran said. How do you see the evolution of yourself, for example, about a solution for Jerusalem from some kind of separation to some kind of an open city? How do you see it in your thinking and maybe in Jewish left thinking and generally speaking?
Yes, okay, thank you very much. Good evening, everybody. Good evening, Nivin, Eran, Miriam. Happy to see you. Okay, as you said, Meron, I came to the idea of open city very lately, okay, recently. In my work in the 90s and Geneva Initiative 2003, I contributed to Camp David Summit and the Geneva Initiative, supporting the hard division between Jerusalem and Al-Quds. I changed my mind mostly because of the new situation on the ground. First checking whether the separation, the hard border that we suggested in Geneva is possible to implement without paying too heavy cost. Today, the cost is much higher than what it was in 2003. The separation wall that Israel built brought the Palestinians in Jerusalem to tighten their relations and connections on a daily base connections to West Jerusalem, to Jewish Jerusalem. So the mutual dependency that Eran spoke about now, after 23 or more than 20 years of a wall separating between Al-Quds and the West Bank, the mutual dependency is much, much higher, and it is impossible to have hard border without paying a cost that will create Yerushalayim and Al-Quds two dead-end cities. It will kill both of them. So if we look for the benefit of the cities, the residents, the capital of the state of Palestine, the capital of the state of Israel, the imperative is not to divide. So it's impossible also to keep or to divide the old city from Al-Quds and Yerushalayim and keep just the old city open. I can go to details and show that in practice, it will never work. It cannot work. Now, Jerusalem is not just the old city. I know that many non-Jerusalemites think wrongly that Jerusalem is the old city. No, wrong. Jerusalem is a living and urban entity. The largest city in in Israel and the largest city to be in Palestine. Two big cities. Today we have almost 1 million residents under the Israeli sovereignty in Jerusalem. 10% of the Israelis live in Jerusalem. 10% of the Palestinians in the Palestinian territories, occupied territories, live in Jerusalem. So we cannot ignore and say, okay, Jerusalem is something small, less than 1 square kilometer, old city, and that's it. So we have to look on Jerusalem from an urban development perspective and put at the top of our to-do list the benefit of Jerusalem residents and the benefit of the urban entity. And it's hard to non-Jerusalemites to make it, but this is a must. So therefore, my vision is that in any forthcoming negotiations, Jerusalemites, people from Jerusalem, will lead the negotiations on Jerusalem. It did not happen. It did not happen in the past. In the past, people from Tel Aviv, people from the government that only visit Jerusalem or recently came to live because they have a job, a day job in Jerusalem, or use the train to commute to Jerusalem, they took the decisions about Jerusalem. Or people living in Ramallah and taking the decisions about Al-Quds. So this is one. Second, any agreement, final status agreement that I support of the two-state solution and two capitals, Al-Quds and Yerushalayim, must create much more equality between Al-Quds and Yerushalayim. Today, there is a total dependency of the Palestinians in the Israelis' resources, benefits, and everything. Even before negotiation, today, yesterday, a week ago, Israel, for its own sake, should have invested in East Jerusalem, in the Palestinian neighborhoods of Jerusalem, in order to build it up, because the gap is running against the Palestinians and against the Israelis equally. This city doomed to fail if there is no equality between the two sides. I would like also, and I cannot ignore, based on my experience, I cannot ignore the security issue.
Let's talk about it. I will return to this issue later.
No, I would like that to put the title. Okay.
Okay.
In the context of two open cities, we must lay down an action plan with different new security concepts, security strategy. We cannot rely and build and have open city with the present Israeli security strategies. This must change. And all my interest is not just having a vision, is having an action plan with stages, how we get to that vision from where we are today. Okay, thank you. Now the floor is yours.
It's not mine, it's Nivin's. Nivin, Eran said at the beginning that it was already Faisal Husseini that was talking about an open Jerusalem, and that Palestinians, generally speaking, were promoting the idea of an open city. So from this perspective, can you give us your vision on Jerusalem with all, the very hard reality that we are seeing every day in Jerusalem?
Yeah. So good evening, everybody, and thank you so much for having me, and especially a Palestinian voice, talking about also listening to the Palestinian perspective about this as well. So I think it's very important, and I'm very grateful for that. And good evening, Professor Menachem and Eran and everybody. So yeah, what can I say after what I've heard? Because for me, when you first asked that question, came to my mind, could I even think of a vision of Jerusalem given the reality, the harsh reality on the ground? And I thought, before having that vision, there are smaller steps that need to happen in order to build that vision. And some of those smaller vision, I think, were touched upon a little bit by Eran and Professor Menachem, is I would like to call them the small wins or the smaller steps that lead towards that vision. Yani, for example, when we talk about the police violence in the city, how can we imagine an open city when there is such a harsh reality on the ground regarding police violence towards the different group? Another reality on the ground, the residency status of the Palestinians themselves. It doesn't put us on equal footage. Can we actually say that we are citizens? Can we actually say that we are, where is my citizenship going to be? Is it going to be in Israel? Is it going to be in Palestine? That's another big question that we also need to consider as well. Another thing that we need to consider is the economy. And I think both also touched on this as well, that when we're talking about economy specifically, the East Jerusalemites are more and more dependent on the west side of the city and on Israel in general, where the Chamber of Commerce has been, by political order, closed down in the east side of the city. If you look at the economy in general, if you look at merchants, they're really suffering on a daily basis. They don't have the support that you see on the west side of the city. More and more kids are dropping out from school. I have to go and say all of these things. We're talking about—
why not, I would interfere with the question, although I didn't. Sure. Why not separate? If this is the situation, why not separate and have the Palestinian side? It's not always east and west. Sometimes it's north, sometimes it's south. But let's say the Palestinian side of the city, why not separate and have its own economy, own jurisdiction, own sovereignty? Why insist on an open city?
That's a good question. I am a Jerusalemite myself. I was born in this city. I love the city, both west and east. I feel I belong here. And I cannot imagine walls running between my city. But I can imagine rights. I can imagine the Palestinians' dream of having an independent state with the capital of East Jerusalem being a reality as well. And that solution can also give the Israeli fulfillment also their own national aspirations as well. But no, not to have a wall in the city. It's if you have a wall in the city, I think here repeat what I also heard, it will kill the city. Yani for Palestinians to even contribute more to the economy of the overall city, they need to strengthen their own economy first. We need to have the Chamber of Commerce. We need to have a political entity. We need to have representatives. Who represents the people in Jerusalem right now? We don't have representation. It's the Palestinian Authority. Anything that the Palestinian Authority is trying to do in the east side of the city is completely stopped. And people are taken to detention. If we are trying to say that why don't you vote at the municipality? No, we don't want to vote at the municipality because it contradicts with our national identity. So the only solution is to separate, two-state solution, two different capitals, but Jerusalem should be, after we have equal rights and we have trust building measures between both sides, that's when we can actually imagine a city of open borders and people respecting each other as well and celebrating the diversity that exists in this place as well. It's, again, I would also add that Jerusalem is not only the old city of Jerusalem. We're talking about neighborhoods and we're talking about a wall that runs already between the city. And this wall has created even a bigger problem. If we think that a city for the future can have a wall, we do have an example, Kufr Aqab neighborhood, Shu'afat refugee camp, and Anata. They are Jerusalem behind the wall. What have we created? We have created a place where there is no law at all. People pay taxes, they don't receive services, lots of weapons over there, lots of social problems. And by the end of the day, all of this is going to repeat itself in forms of violence, also against Palestinians, but also against Israelis. So we need to kind of, first of all, think of the human rights as rights, guarantee the very basics for both sides, and then think about it to have it like, that vision of an open city.
Before going on with the discussion, I just we will have now a very short, simple questionnaire that Miriam will put for you, for those who join us, about what, if you want to participate in other discussion, live or not live, do you want to know more about Land for All and etc. And you are invited to answer and fill it. It will help us a lot. And so, Nivin, I want to start the second round with you. And it is because we talked before, so I used with the very difficult reality that you described: police violence, inequality, dependence of Palestinian East Jerusalemite on the West, and etc. What still do you see in civil society today that gives some opportunity to work and change things on the ground today? And then I will go on to Menachem, and Eran, I will go to the other way around.
So I'll first of all speak of the challenges in the sense of civil society, but then I will also touch upon what is happening that builds the trust between both sides. So one of the challenges that are specifically faced by the Palestinian civil society is the lack of funding, because they need to prove all the time where the funding resources are coming from. The other thing is that civil society itself cannot do any kind of political activism. So they always need also to get permits in order to do their activities as well. The activities that they can do in the city is basically around culture and art, but not political activism. And if even it is art and culture perceived to have received funding from the Palestinian Authority, the activity is immediately stopped, and the people behind it are going to detention. Now, the other side, there are people who are trying to build bridges between both sides of the city. From one hand, if you are a Palestinian and you're working in this let's say, peace building, trying to have a voice and representation, you are viewed as the normalizer. So it's also from another side that you cannot actually work with the other side. You're the traitor. You're acknowledging that the municipality of Jerusalem has jurisdiction, even though we pay taxes, but still we don't want to have anything to do with the municipality. Despite those very difficult and real challenges, we find people that are being, okay, we're not giving our national identity up, but we also want to work in a way that improves the lives of the people in the city. So we have, for example, something called the Jerusalem model. It's an umbrella for Palestinian and for Israeli activists in the city. They share experiences sometimes, they receive funding, they receive support in what they do, technical or elsewhere. But it's really interesting to see that this is a small channel for them where they can get, the support needed, at least from the municipality and also from peer organizations, to do what they want to do in the east side of the city. So instead of, for example, going and talking about home demolitions and how bad it is, of course it's bad, of course it shouldn't be happening, but they think of ways how to connect with actors in the west side of the city to make sure that we build something for the Palestinians instead of just demolishing. They're doing it at a very, very low under the radar.
Profile.
Low profile, yes, I was looking for the word. But it's happening, and it is happening, and it's a very important role that civil society is doing right now to build the trust between both people in the city. I can also refer to the Good Neighborhood Project in Abu Tur, for example. And the Good Neighborhood Project is a project that basically connects the people that share the same neighborhood together. They begin with teaching them that similar language, Arabic and Hebrew, maybe doing some activities together for the sake of the neighborhood. And these things are really important because they start by building the trust. You're not giving up your national aspirations. You're not giving up your national identity as a Palestinian or an Israeli, but you understand that we share this space together. And in order to live here, we need to have these trust building measures.
Menachem, I will try here to be the devil advocate. Nivin was talking about two national stories, two national identities. They conflict for, as Eran said, for 100 years, from 1920 till today. Almost every year or so, we have something that, is it really possible for these two nationalities to live together in the same city and prosper and not bring the conflict or that there will be a radiation of this conflict from Jerusalem to the whole of the land? Is it really possible? Two national conflicting identities.
Short answer, yes. Now the details. See, the narrative, okay, agreement, a peace agreement, peace treaty is a political document, political legal document on ending territorial and sovereignty claims. That's it. It's not a compromise about identity. It's not giving up identity, not giving up historical attachment to the place, nothing beyond this. This is one. Second, the identities are here to remain. The bad feelings and the bad memories and the dispute and the commemoration days, different commemoration days and tragedies, attacks, violence, they will be remembered for many, many years ahead after the peace treaty signed. And peace is not about that. Peace is about who takes the decision on everyday life on a certain territory, and how we can live without violence, or let's say, occupy the violence and make it latent other than active. That's it. So it's not a compromise about holiness, holy places, giving up identity, and so on. It will be nice and good that the Jews will learn and will know the Palestinian narrative and vice versa. But not necessarily it can be achieved immediately. Maybe the sides do not have to learn.
So how do you prevent these two conflicting nationalities to arrive in violence and to repeat the violence that we are seeing? How do you prevent it if the city is open?
Okay, so here you touch what I said earlier about the security arrangements. But let's be clear, a peace treaty is that we settle our debate regarding sovereignty and territory, okay? Now, each side commit itself not to use force in order to achieve sovereignty over land. That's it. Okay. maybe we have to postpone the final status agreement on refugees, maybe, but on territory and in Jerusalem, we can get an agreement. Maybe, I don't know, or at least the return of all refugees, maybe return of a limited number, it is possible to achieve. The right of return, to realize the right of return of all Palestinian 48 to 67 refugees to Israel per se, maybe this can be postponed. So end of claims, except a certain claim.
We will touch refugees in a different...
Okay, let's put it aside. But security arrangements must be different. We cannot have open city with the present Israeli security strategy. The security strategy is built, the Israeli security strategy is built on two foundations. First, Israeli superiority, and second, exclusive Israeli security management. Exclusive, even not international force. This must change. With these two principles, we can build a nuclear ghetto, but we cannot have an open city. We cannot integrate into the region. And I don't want Jerusalem to look like El Al terminal in an airport, in a foreign country airport, where Israeli security men surrounded all the passengers in a kind of a ghetto. This is a recipe for isolation and segregation. This cannot work in a situation of peace and integration.
Eran, I want to continue from what Menachem said. Menachem said the word Israeli supremacy. How do you see, that you go and also guide groups in the city, you meet people, many Israelis, how can anything equal could be achieved? And again, I want to stress, our idea, two states, one homeland, the land for all, is for equal rights in the city, of no group governing the other, that there will be at least a veto power for each group to prevent the other group to impose its will on the other group. How do we go out from the current situation of complete Israeli supremacy in the city? You're on mute, Eran.
Well, thank you. Well, there is a simple answer, of course, and this is full rights, equality and full rights. And of course, then it becomes more complicated when you go into the details. If it means that Israel gives citizenship to all the East Jerusalemites immediately, then of course, it will have ramifications on the entire Israeli-Palestinian relations. It will mean what I see as a reality for a long time now, but unofficially it is still called occupation with a temporary kind of feeling, right? Recently it is starting to be changed and being called apartheid even by Israeli human rights organizations. But if Israel gives citizenship to all the Palestinian Jerusalemites, it means the final end of the two-state solution, and it means that there will never be a Palestinian state, because there will never be a Palestinian state without East Jerusalem. I think we lost Nivin, if I'm not mistaken. So
yes.
No, I'm here, but you need to pin me again.
Okay. Yeah, and the other possibility is to let Palestinians administer their own lives, which means Palestinians will vote for their own municipality, for their own parliament, and their own prime minister and president. It means that Palestinian police officers will administer or will regulate life and keep the law and order and security in East Jerusalem, or in this way or another, right? In this way or another. Now, of course, we can go into the details of your question, but by large, Israel cannot bestow equality on the Palestinians. Equality is something you take. It's not something you get. Israel will never be able to give the Palestinians equality in East Jerusalem if it will give them more money, unless Palestinians will participate in the distribution of resources, in the voting for choosing their own representatives. And if they refuse to do it in the Israeli municipality and in the Israeli parliament, then they will have to do it on their own. So to say equality is not that Israel will give more resources to East Jerusalem, that the sidewalks and garbage evacuation will be in the level of West Jerusalem neighborhood. It means Palestinians are participating in allocation of the public funding, resources, etc. Okay, and that is the answer to your question. Of course, how to get there is a different story.
I will take some short thing before we go to some of our questions. Nivin, how do Palestinian? It's a huge. There are 400,000 Palestinians in Jerusalem, and you cannot speak for 400,000 Palestinians. But do Palestinians see any hope in this situation, and do they really believe that this is something that is possible, or you think they lost hope that it is possible to really have an equal, fair city?
Okay, so first of all, I want to check that my connection is working.
We hear you all right.
Perfect. So it's a big question that you have asked. And definitely whatever answer I'm going to give is not going to be representative of the 360,000 people who live in the city. But let's look at reality, what is going on. So we see an increased number of Palestinians applying to get an Israeli citizenship, to move from a status of resident to a status of citizen. But that doesn't mean that they give up their national aspirations. Again, it just means that we want to make sure that we have equal rights. That's it. If we choose to live in a place other than Israel or Jerusalem, that we have the right to come back to our own city, not that our residency is going to be revoked. It also means that we're going to be treated differently by the police, differently when we travel or choose to travel from Ben Gurion. We don't have to go through harsh security measures when we travel. So it's very basic things that make more or less an increased population apply for an Israeli citizenship. And we also see those that are still affiliated to Palestinian political parties, and they still have the same values and the same aspirations as those political parties, whether it is Hamas or Fatah. They are in the city and they fight for that national aspiration, the city being the capital of Jerusalem. The majority of Palestine. The majority, as far as I see it, are disconnected, and Palestinians in the city are creating their own identity. Since we don't have representation in the Palestinian Authority, why? Because we haven't had elections since 2006, and we're unable to vote in anything that is regarding the Palestinian Authority. So we don't have representation over there. We are disconnected from the political center, from the economic center, through physical wall, but also through the fact that we have a different legal status. On the Israeli side, we're also not represented. We cannot vote in the Knesset, but we also choose not to vote in the municipality. So we don't have representative in the municipality either. So what's happening in the city is we're creating our own national, it's a kind of a new identity that's being created. We, the Jerusalemites, we are the ones who are defending Al-Aqsa. We are the ones who are representing the steadfastness in our land, Sheikh Jarrah, Silwan. No matter what the difficulties are, we're always gonna be here. We don't need neither the Israelis nor the Palestinians to be here. What is the solution for that? I think it's just that we need to have representatives from those people, because we don't have actually people who can say, I speak on behalf of the Palestinians, let us negotiate. I present the Palestinians in the city. We don't have that. And the moment we have representatives from the city, I think Dr. Menachem touched on that a little bit. We need to have people from the city to be able to negotiate what the city actually wants. And another thing, second point that I actually wanted to bring is, what comes first, the egg or the hen? Should Jerusalem be an example of what it looks like for Palestinians and Israelis to live together in a shared city while both are accepting and respecting each other's national identity? Or should Jerusalem be part of first of all, the Palestinian Authority, the Palestinian Liberation Organization and Israel reach a political agreement, and then something is going to happen?
What's your preference?
My preference, honestly, is that there are people living on the ground right now, and we cannot wait for a political solution. Politicians do their thing. Yeah, I mean, I think they have all the time in the world. They're making profit both sides of the status quo. And right now, the people on the ground are paying the price. So I prefer that we start with the people, Jerusalem as an example.
Very short, 2 minutes for Menachem on the note that and then we will have one question and maybe a comment. Taking on from Nivin, this dilemma that she presented, do you think Jerusalem could be, and this is maybe what me from Tel Aviv, sometimes maybe it's an illusion, but maybe tell me that it is not, that Jerusalem could be some kind of a laboratory for building this shared homeland? Do you think it is possible?
Jerusalem, of course it is possible. I would like to say two things. First, Jerusalem today is the place where there is the biggest, largest interaction between Jews and Arabs. No other place in the West Bank or in the state of Israel, there are so many Arabs and meeting so many Jews elsewhere. Okay, so this is a fact, given fact, and we can build on it. So it is, we have to take it into account. Second, now I will speak for the sake of West Jerusalem, of Jewish Jerusalem. We must let the Palestinians have their own municipality, Al-Quds, for the sake of West Jerusalem, to rescue Jewish Jerusalem. The situation today of Jewish Jerusalem is terrible. Jerusalem is a poor city. It is too big, too poor, and too big in size and too big in population. Cannot be managed. So we have to rescue West Jerusalem by giving up territory and population to the state of Palestine, to Al-Quds. And we have to start today, or we have had to start yesterday, by allocating powers to the East Jerusalemites to build their own representatives, to own institutions, and to let them apply for funds from abroad and from other Arab countries in order to invest in Palestinian Jerusalem. This is for the sake of Jewish Jerusalem. It's not for the sake of the Palestinians.
Eran, more or less the same question, a laboratory for some kind of shared consciousness, even consciousness of a shared land to Jerusalem. Is that really a possibility in this, regarding what we see today from Shirin Abu Akleh's funeral and the flag march and all these things that we are seeing daily? You are muted.
Yes, same issue over again. I think it's a good question. I think Jerusalem knows to accommodate different religions, different people. It has been done so for many years with occasional bursts of violent events, but with many years of calm and some sort of shared coexistence. Of course, the national era, the last century, the 20th century, has changed things. But even between the riots in Jerusalem in the 1920s and the riots in Jerusalem in the 1990s, we had decades of relative calm in Jerusalem despite everything that happened. Yeah, despite the Arab rebellion in the 30s, in 1948 and in 67, Jerusalem was relatively calm. We had 30 years of tacit understandings between the Islamic Waqf and the Israeli authorities. What is required here to enable Jerusalem just do what it knows, to enable people from different faith and different identities to live together, is to manage the city wisely and gently and take a lot of power from the Israeli police and give it to civil society and civil organizations, and even just civic institutions like social workers, municipality, education. The police is too big and too strong and takes too many responsibilities in East Jerusalem. And the Israeli police, like any police, is a hammer. It is the only institution, except the army, that is has the monopoly over physical power. It is a hammer. And when you are a hammer, every problem looks like a nail you need to bang on. And the Israeli police keeps banging on Palestinian society's public sphere, Palestinian society's collective identity, etc. So it is possible, but we need to administer the city wisely and delicately and with some kind of intelligence. I want also to say about that coexistence in Jerusalem doesn't mean that we're all standing around holding hands and singing songs of peace and love. It means we're not killing each other. It means Sarajevo, it means Belfast, it means that we have different, mixed, divided, deeply divided cities in the world that are anchored in a national, religious, ethnic conflict, and that have moved from violence to some kind of political process, quiet tension. It doesn't mean we're going to all live here in peace and love and brotherhood and sisterhood, maybe, hopefully one day, but it means that we can accommodate each other and accept each other together. When you see an ultra-Orthodox man with his family walking through Damascus Gate to the Western Wall, alongside a group of Christians on their way to the Holy Sepulchre and Muslims going to Al-Aqsa Mosque, this is the normal situation in Jerusalem. This is the normal daily reality of Jerusalem. I grew up working in the market. I'll just say that I grew up working with Palestinian teenagers in the market from Shafat refugee camp. This is normal.
This is normal, but I want to take the one suggestion from Arnon Ariel is saying that sovereignty says regarding Jerusalem, sovereignty means exclusive ownership. I offer instead joint ownership. And reality must be based, second thing is reality must be based on majority decision. I suggest instead mutual agreements. How do you relate to this, Menachem, Eran, Nivin?
Okay.
Does anyone want to relate to this?
Can I continue? Can
yes.
I just continue
yes.
the flow?
Yes.
I just want to say, first of all, sovereignty is the problem in Jerusalem. It's not the solution. The Westphalian concept that evolved in Europe 300-400 years ago of sovereignty as we know it today doesn't necessarily represent the right solution for Jerusalem. Definitely not to the Holy Basin, the Old City, and the Al-Aqsa Mosque and the Temple Mount. Yeah. I think in this regard, sovereignty is not part of the solution. It is part of the problem.
So shared sovereignty seems to you a good idea.
I don't know what it means, shared sovereignty. Menachem maybe knows to say if there are examples from the world. I will just remind us that Israel or the Zionist movement agreed more than once to give up sovereignty over Jerusalem, even if it was just a tactic agreement in 1937 and then in 1947. Israel agreed for the establishment of the State of Israel without sovereignty over Jerusalem.
And about some agreements in the running of the city, that the running of the city will be based on agreement between the community. How do you see that?
I will get someone else, please.
No, I think I was in Belfast once. And again, this is one of the good examples where civil society can contribute. Because that was an initiative by civil society to bring Palestinians and Israelis together to see shared sovereignty from other examples. And I think like Belfast can be one of those where it's rotating. Sarajevo is another example as well. So I think as people, we'll go back to this main point. We need to have representatives from both people who can agree on what shared sovereignty looks like. I cannot, as Nivin or somebody from Tel Aviv or somebody from Ramallah, come and decide on behalf of the people how this looks like. We need to have representatives decide how this is going to look like, but definitely not a sovereignty of one part only, because it will have, again, we will stay in this idea of supremacy, which is going to, again, make us fall into the cycle of violence.
Menachem, I want to, you may comment on this also, but I want to use your expertise also, because this is something that we somehow ignored. I have an impression that in the last few years, the right, the more settler, let's say, what we call settler, in Jerusalem, it's, let's say, the settler movement wants really, with going on Al-Aqsa and the flag march and etc., want really to ignite Jerusalem. To how do you see it? Do you think really the right wing or part of the right wing are targeting Jerusalem in order to make it, the place that will burn the whole of the land?
It started. I don't know. Last years, you mean 2000, but it started in 2000. Whenever the first news came out from Camp David that the Israeli delegation accepted the principle of dividing Jerusalem, regardless the borders, how to divide and who get the small size and who get the big size, never mind. Then the right wing in general and the national religious movements in particular started to act in Jerusalem. They called a very big rally next to Jaffa Gate while Camp David is running. Camp David Summit is running. Since then, they put all their efforts in Jerusalem. They intensified settling into Palestinian Muslim Palestinian neighborhoods and change the status quo, de facto change the status quo on the Temple Mount, Haram Sharif, with closed eyes of the Israeli government against the statements made by Netanyahu, the commitments made by Netanyahu. The Jews will only visit Temple Mount. But actually the police and the authorities turned blind eye to when Israeli Jews pray, even in Minyan, in the quorum, the 10 people quorum, they pray there on the Temple Mount. So it's not only to blow up any attempt to have a peace treaty or negotiations between Israelis and Palestinians, but according to the national religious, this is the core issue that the struggle over all Palestine will be determined. It's a mirror image of the Hamas Islamic radical covenants and the Islamic radical worldview. It's just a mirror image. Unfortunately, all Israeli governments are incapable to stand against them because the settler movements, the national religious movement and the settler right-wing movements integrated into the state machinery. They are not wild cats. They are the state. They are
we are having a wildcat here on
no.
screen.
It's an educated, enlightened cat. Although it's black, but it's enlightened. So the right-wing settler movements are part of the establishment. It's not outside the establishment as it was, let's say, mid-70s, 80s, and so on. This is a big difference, and it may lead to a catastrophe, I must say. It may lead to a civil war. We watch this small-scale civil war last year in May, in Jaffa, in Akka, in Lod, and elsewhere in the Galilee. This is the danger.
Okay, Nivin, maybe you will also want to refer to that, but there was a question I missed from Abishai. I would like to ask Nivin what it takes to have Arab residents of Jerusalem to change the city council current characteristic of 32 members, 27 males, 5 female, all Jewish, majority Orthodox Jews, by voting in the municipal election, what it takes for the Arabs to change this situation.
I have to say, first of all, that we had an example in 2018 where a Palestinian from the city decided to run for the municipal council together with a Palestinian list.
Aziz Abu Sarah.
Yes, and of course, it was a nightmare for the Israeli right wing that, as you say in Hebrew, خسف خليلة, Palestinians to control the municipality. But at the same time, he also faced difficulties from the society itself. So one, because the society itself is, let's say, it's the best word that I can describe it, is hijacked by a political narrative that we grew up with, that you cannot have representation in the municipality because that means you're acknowledging the power of the municipality over East Jerusalem, but you pay your taxes. So if you actually participate in these elections, whether by voting or by nomination, it means that you are actually a traitor to your national cause. What it takes, I think, is maybe more trust-building measures from the Israeli side. I think Iran spoke about the police violence, for example. How can I go and vote and believe that I'm going to create a difference when I see the police treating me as less, as inferior, or when I don't feel that I can change things at the municipality either? I think it's it's again this question of where do you start? Like, does it start by voting to change the situation, or the municipality needs to change the situation so that people actually vote? And the thing is, the municipality is never going to actually invest in the east side of the city, because they are not voters. They don't vote. They don't give you political power. So why would I be interested as a mayor to change their situation over there? It might be a beginning, and it might be a risk for a mayor to kind of invest in the city, get people to trust, and then vote. Or the people themselves decide to, okay, we know we have rights to do that, and so let's vote. And it's a peaceful way to kind of take over the city. Sovereignty, again, this question. But it's really difficult. So it's kind of like you look at it from two different sides to answer that question.
I take two more questions. One is from Yosef Avisar question. Our organization is talking about the group, American that active, I don't remember exactly the name, but also promote the confederation, an Israeli-Palestinian confederation. Our organization propose a common government with veto power to the Israeli and Palestinian government. Do you see any difficulty with that? And if so, what? I would like to answer it. If I may, our idea is to delegate more power to Jerusalemites, meaning that the veto power is not by the Israeli government or by the Palestinian government of the running of the city, but to the communities. This is how I view it, and I think we in Land for All view it, that a veto power that for the Palestinian community and or Jewish community in Jerusalem, if there will be some kind of a shared municipality or super municipality over the two municipalities of East and West. And there's a question by Robin Capsuto to Eran specifically. Eran speaks about Jews, Christian, Muslim being able to access holy places in Jerusalem. I have a point out of this this only. He says that he refers that only after 67, this is what he claims, only after 67 with Israeli jurisdiction has the city been open to all religious groups, and before 67 it was not. How do you...
She, not he. She.
Sorry, she. Okay, she is asking that, is claiming that before, only after 67 with the Israeli jurisdiction, holy places are open to all, while during the Jordanian rule between 48 and 67, it was not.
I mean, I'm not going to, I feel like it's kind of the classical argument that, of course, if I was born Palestinian, most likely I'll think Palestinians are just and Israelis are bad. And if I was born in Israeli, it is most likely that I'll think that Israelis are just and Palestinians are bad. I'm not going to allow me to not to answer directly this question. It's, I think, I don't find it, okay. I do want to say that I grew up as an Israeli, believing this cliche narrative that Israel brought to the light, and I actually was a security guard in East Jerusalem. I've seen this area of the city also from the perspective of the Israeli security apparatus. And as I've learned to listen and to broaden my sight, first of all, to learn Arabic, and then not only to understand the language, but also to understand the people who speak it and to listen to them, not only to talk to them in Arabic, or to, I don't know, learn about them in order to defeat them, but actually to listen and try and understand them. I've realized that the level of alienation that the people in East Jerusalem feel to the city, it's not that Nivin talks about police violence. It's not that a police officer was violent to Nivin. it is a complete apparatus of alienation from the entire system. Because also an Israeli Jew can experience police violence in Jerusalem. There was demonstrations in Balfour. There was, of course, in different levels, but we can all say that bureaucracy is tiring, but the level of alienation is completely different. And Palestinians experience the city of Jerusalem as a municipality and the police as an occupying power. It's completely alien to them. It is not representing them in the deep sense. It is entirely aimed to alienate them from the city. So in this sense, yes, so we can tell ourselves stories that we are good and just and we brought light and peace and justice to the Middle East. But on the ground, Palestinians experience a different reality. Now, if we talk about a Palestinian, a political agreement, a political reality, put aside judgment. If I may be wrong, I may be right, it is maybe true or false, but when reality is perceived in two so different, contradicting ways, if you want to move forward to a sustainable and what I see as just reality, you need to take into account both perspectives and understand them and give them some kind of representation. If we keep thinking one side,
do you take, excuse me, Eran.
This is it's going to be a discussion, a dialogue. There is like a moderator. So I cannot have a direct dialogue with 50 people. So let's please keep it like this. But that is my answer. I wanted to comment about something else, if you would allow me, but I see that Menachem.
I think Menachem wants to comment on this too.
Yeah, I would like to relate to Robin's question. Indeed, the Jordanians did not fulfill Article 8 of the ceasefire, okay, and violated their commitment to let Jews pray near the Wailing Wall and go to Mount of Olives. But history did not start in 48 with the Jordanians. History started much, much earlier. And the Muslims enjoyed exclusive prey and management over Al-Haram for the last 1400 years. So this was the reality there for many, many years, hundreds of years, for 1400 years. Jews could, in the past, pray privately under Muslim management and sovereignty, under the Ottomans and the Mamluks and so on. There were times that the Muslims did not allow Jews to pray there. But history is complicated. I can understand the Israeli Hasbara, fine, but let's look into the facts on the ground. The facts of the ground, yes, Jordan violated, did not let Jews, Israeli Jews, American Jews could enter Jordan and went to the Wailing Wall. They went to Mount of Olives. The Jordanian municipality paved a road in the cemetery, in the Jewish cemetery. This was a desecration of the Jewish cemetery. Yes, indeed. Yes, it was. Israelis, okay, at the same years of the 19 years of the physically divided Jerusalem between Jordan and Israel, Israel desecrated the Muslim graveyards in Gan Ha'atzmaut. Gan Ha'atzmaut is built
in the Mamila cemetery.
In the Mamila cemetery is built on a Muslim cemetery. Okay, it was built in purpose, knowing that there was there a cemetery. So, okay, both sides are not totally clean here in their doings.
There were also synagogues in Jerusalem, in the old city. There were synagogues.
Can I say a point?
Yes, and
yes, Nivin.
Robin, you are right. But at the same time, there were mosques in West Jerusalem that Israel occupied, and now you go to Malcha, next to the mall, visit the mosque, there you still see the minaret there, and it's an apartment. See what happened in Tzfat. So it's not the one side is totally clean and the other side is
okay. Nivin.
No, unless there is another. Unless
there's
another question, I don't want to comment. So let's take another question.
So I will. I think we are nearing the end. So I will ask for. I will speak a little bit about myself again as someone from Tel Aviv. When I saw the idea how to separate Jerusalem and how to build walls and tunnels and bridges in Jerusalem, I came to a conclusion that as we cannot separate the heart of the conflict, we cannot separate the conflict on the whole of the land. Can you, for closing remarks, refer to this feeling I had that maybe it's in the basis of the thinking of a land for all, that because Jerusalem is so complicated and very hard to divide, it will be very difficult to base the whole conflict, the whole solution on separation. And whoever, just two minutes for you, Menachem, yes.
Yeah, I fully agree. It is impossible to find an agreement. I don't know solution. There is no, okay, I hate the solution. Okay. Agreement regarding Jerusalem, unrelated to what's going on in the rest of the land, the rest of the country. Otherwise, Jerusalem will be the place where everybody come to settle the debate regarding, let's say, Jenin or Hebron. Okay, that's true. But with the same token, we should not, based on the lessons that I learned from the failed Oslo and failed Camp David, we should not postpone Jerusalem to the end of the negotiations. We should start with Jerusalem. This is one of the lessons that I learned from the failure of Oslo and Geneva or previous attempts. Okay, we have to start with Jerusalem and then follow from Jerusalem to the rest of the country.
Eran?
So of course, Jerusalem today is big, and some arrangements can be done regarding to the peripheral areas that are now called Jerusalem. But as a symbol, Jerusalem is Zion for Zionism and for the Jewish people and for Israel. It is the rationale upon which the Zionist movement was based on, even when it didn't want to acknowledge it. Today, when religious nationalism is the hegemonic ideology in Israel, definitely so. Al-Aqsa and Al-Quds are the heart of the Palestinian national identity and national movement from the very beginning. Given this fact, and given the power national religious ideas have today in both societies, mainstream ideology, it seems like a harsh division of Jerusalem with a compromise and a final status agreement is impossible. Instead, we should share the city entirely, including theological debate alongside the political and understanding that some issues will not be settled. We will need to learn to live in a broken reality in which the exact arrangements on the Al-Aqsa Mosque, Al-Haram Al-Sharif, the Temple Mount will not be completely understood and settled. For 30 years, we could live with this unsettled reality of tacit understandings. Once the peace process started and we needed to define everything, this arrangement collapsed and we started fighting over control. So will Jews have a right to pray exactly here and when and where will Muslims rule and control Al-Aqsa? Maybe we can't decide that. But it is definitely impossible to reach a solution without understanding, without some kind of an understanding in Jerusalem. If we go on an interim process, it must be learning from Oslo. We must relate to the loopholes in the interim period. Start with Jerusalem. Administer Jerusalem wisely. Yeah, and together, because in the last time we tried, during the interim period, Jerusalem became the arena where the peace process collapsed. Yeah, so we cannot postpone Jerusalem. We cannot really divide Jerusalem because it is Zion and it is Al-Aqsa and it is a symbol. And we need to learn how to live with Jerusalem as some kind of, we need to learn to live in Jerusalem in this imperfect reality. Yeah. And I think the Land for All vision, even if I don't sign now and every word of the vision of the Confederation, I think the understanding that this shared reality is our reality here in this land, it is absolutely representing Jerusalem. And what happens in Jerusalem will eventually happen in the entire land. Yeah, so,
yeah. Nivin, your take? Your final remark?
What can I say? What can I say after after this? No, but I think that we tend to always think at a higher level of you know, governing the city. But again, for me, I will take it back to the level of the grassroots. That right now we have people living there. The people don't trust each other. True, they interact with each other on almost a daily basis. They work with each other, but they don't trust each other. They don't understand each other's narratives. They don't understand the diversity that could be celebrated in the city. They don't understand this alienation that Eran spoke about beautifully. So I think for me, it starts from there. It starts from teaching the younger generations about the narratives, but also about having a fight together. I will use this term, co-resist this alienation, because we all belong to this city. And once we start understanding the narratives, understanding why is Zion so important? Why is Al-Haram al-Sharif so important? Maybe we can share it after all. Then we can have these representatives that can look at examples from around the world, Belfast, Sarajevo, elsewhere. How can we actually share our city? That's my beautiful cat. So yeah, I think we need to, after building this with the people, we need to start thinking and looking at examples how we're going to co-administer the city together, where every single group feels represented and have a voice as well.
Okay, so I thank you all. I think it was a very fascinating discussion. It gave me, at least, and I hope the speakers and first of all the audience, some kind of hope in these very dark days. Just a final remark from Robin, who says it looks like a Vatican City. At least in my view, it's not really a Vatican City, because there are national representation and national identities that are will be represented and manifested to two states, and not just Vatican without any very large, without any national specification. So I thank you again. I invite you to fill this form that Miriam sent, and invite you to participate in our activities, to follow the other discussion that we are going to have about refugees, about shared homeland, about settlements. We are touching the very problematic issues because they are problematic. We are not avoiding them. We are charging on them. Thank you again, and Miriam will have some closing remarks. And thank you again for all, for Nivin, for Menachem, for Eran, and for you all following us.
Thank you so much, Meron and Eran and Menachem and Nivin, and to you all for joining us tonight. Really, it was extremely fascinating, and I hope you all enjoyed the last hour and a half or so. It was extremely thought-provoking to hear your insights. So I'm reminding you all that as Meron said, this was the second meeting in a series of 5. Our next meeting is on June the 28th, same time on Zoom. And if you haven't already registered, you can go back into the same registration, or you can also email me at miriam@alandforall.org. It will be looking at the issue of refugees and the right of return as seen through Alpha's Confederation approach. Again, we are really at the stage of inviting people for feedback. We're trying to understand people's needs, people who are interested, your needs and your interests in how to help us develop this movement, both on a professional level, a grassroots level, top down, bottom up. And so please do be in touch. And I invite you also, if you haven't filled in the poll, I'm going to put it up again now. I would also say good night, and anyone who wants to hang around and answer the poll, we would really, really do appreciate that. And I'm also going to post a direct link to our donation page on our website. So thank you again, everyone, and good night.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good night.
Good night.